Welcome back to the Progressive Property YouTube channel. Now, lots of you have been asking, what would I do if I was housing minister? And there is one huge area that I think could make the biggest difference in maybe not the quickest time, but I think it is the priority that I would get to work on day one: the planning system. In this country, we have a huge shortage of homes. It doesn't benefit me as a landlord to say this, but there are not enough properties being built. That is at the core of so many issues, including why house prices, certainly in the southeast, are higher than they maybe need to be. Maybe not in the Midlands and maybe not in the north of England. Why rents are higher than potentially they need to be. Generally speaking, why houses are smaller. Average houses in this country are maybe 700 or 800 square foot, new houses. There's just a lack of supply in each area, so this constricts the employment market and also discourages the right people coming to this country who are going to enter the employment market. So, the planning system, what would I do? Well, the first thing I would do, I would take all these nuts political decisions off local councils. Local councils obviously need to be involved because these are decisions that they understand best on a local level. If you think of lots of areas of the States, if you build houses in an area that is correctly zoned for what you're looking to build, there are a set of very clear rules, a little bit like building regulations. So in this country, if we want to go and build a house, there are a set of rules, a set of codes that if you build that house to that specification, you are guaranteed to get it signed off, not necessarily by the council, but by an approved inspector. And you can pay that approved inspector to come out, check through all the things that you've done, look at maybe the type of windows you've used, look at the insulation you've used, make sure the steels that you've put in have properly been specified and installed as per what a structural engineer has decided on. And as long as you meet all of these criteria, you know you're going to get building regulations approval. That is what needs to happen with the planning system. It needs to be far clearer. And what needs to happen in the local plan or some kind of successor to the local plan is where they say, these are the areas where we're going to build houses. And if you want to buy a piece of land here, you will be able to get planning consent as long as you build this house or this block of flats to these specifications, i.e. this distance from the road or this distance from the property next door, and put this amount of light in, and it needs to be specified. It doesn't need to be woolly like it is at the moment, where planning officers can look at stuff and make highly subjective decisions and effectively delay these applications, so that we're in a situation now when I apply for planning consent, we're probably looking for at least 2 years before that's granted, and then we have to wait even longer to get conditions off. This is at the root of most, I would say, of the problems in our housing market. Reform of the planning system. As part of this, I would also reduce the power of consultees. In fact, I would say a lot of the work that consultees provide and do needs to be done up front before an application even goes in this zoning process, so that you're not bogged down by all of these responses that come from all of these errant consultees, often with far too much power, that then stymies your planning application. The next thing I would do is to properly resource planning departments. Now, the Conservatives have been talking about this for ages. I don't think they ever meant it, because they've only provided a small amount of money, a drop in the ocean. But I think what they could do, they could offer developers an increased fee. So you pay a bigger application fee, and that is linked to the service levels that you receive. Instead of having to wait 2 years for a planning application, let's say you pay a triple fee and it's decided in the 8 weeks that it is supposed to be decided in. And if it's not, then you get a refund of part or all of that fee. Surely that's what would happen in a commercial environment. That's what would happen, if one business was working with another. So surely with a planning application fee, that's what should happen in that scenario as well. That extra money should be ring-fenced for planning departments so that they can be properly resourced, and you could further reform permitted development so that you introduce all of these new standards and specifications into the permitted development scheme. So you know if you've purchased something, you are guaranteed to get planning consent. That would encourage so many more developers to come into the market, and it would reduce the cost significantly because the risk would reduce. You wouldn't have to buy all these sites for cash, and because the time is reduced, you could probably finance them, you'd have less interest to pay, and therefore it would improve the supply of housing significantly. The next thing that I would do on day one of being the housing minister, I'm going to be very busy, I think I'll be up all night on day one, is to cancel the reform of the Section 21. At the moment, they want to ban so-called no-fault evictions. We've already discussed this. Most landlords don't want to evict tenants unless they're not paying their rent. Landlords will put up with lots and lots of sort of errant behaviour as long as tenants are paying their rent and they're not sort of upsetting the neighbours too much. The reason that landlords will use the Section 21 is because when they use the Section 8 and they go to court, the judge will often find lots of reasons why the application fails, whereas with the Section 21 you can evict for any reason. I don't think landlords would have an issue with longer term tenancies, i.e. a 2, a 3, a 5-year lease. Maybe you could deal with reasonable rent rises within that lease. And I think it should be a choice that tenants and landlords can make together as to whether they're going to enter into a lease like that. As part of this, yes, I would reform the Section 8. And again, the reason why landlords don't want to use the Section 8 is because it can take 6-9 months to evict a property in any event. But what I would do with the Section 8, I would make it more sure that tenants can be evicted for rent arrears, and I would accelerate the process. Why not let landlords pay double or triple if they want to get a case heard maybe in a week and get a possession order much quicker? Let them pay double. If they want it done in 2 days, let them pay triple. Surely if you've reached the amount of arrears, maybe 2 months, and tenants had lots and lots of options in order to pay and they're still not doing, why couldn't the process be accelerated for eviction? All that would do then is encourage landlords to buy properties and provide more properties to the rental market, and that will push rents down. It will provide more choice. There will be better properties at lower rent, just like Margaret Thatcher did in the late 80s, and it looks like the Conservatives and Labour are trying to take us further and further back to the 70s, where there was a complete lack of choice, properties were in very bad condition, and we didn't have a vibrant rental market, which then affects the labour market because people can't move around for work as easily, lots of people don't want to buy, so you need a vibrant rental market to encourage growth and to have a properly functioning economy. The next thing I would do is to mandate that all letting agents report on a monthly basis into Experian and to Equifax, the credit referencing agencies, to let them know how a tenant is performing during the tenancy. One of the biggest costs to a landlord's business is when a tenant gets into arrears and doesn't pay their rent. And you get these sort of really bad tenants who tend to surf around in a town, various landlords' properties, and most landlords don't realise that they've done that to somebody else. And all this does is put landlords off, increases the rent, increases the cost of referencing, and all of these other things that landlords have to stop bad tenants going into the properties. What it also does is it means that lots of landlords won't take housing benefit tenants. There are some great housing benefit tenants, but of course, if a landlord can't properly reference them and they're worried about the tenant not paying their rent, it then just puts them off renting to all housing benefit tenants, whether that's allowed or not. That is the reality. So if the credit referencing agencies were involved and you had housing benefit tenants who had been in properties for 2, 3, 5, 10 years, lots of people pay their rent, you know, for 20 years. And the people that do that should get the benefit, so that when they go to rent a property, the letting agent can immediately see how they've behaved in their previous tenancy, and they are way more likely to rent the property to them. The next thing I would do on day one is to abolish the Section 24, the legislation that stops landlords offsetting all the mortgage interest against the rent. Mortgage interest is a core cost of doing business as a landlord. You own a property, you borrow money on it. Any business you've got, if you borrow money or your business borrows money, you can offset that against your corporation tax. Well, landlords should be able to do the same thing as they could do before George Osborne changed this in 2015/16. This is a huge thing. It has discouraged loads and loads of landlords. The amount of properties available to rent has reduced significantly. And because of this, rents have gone up about 40% in this area since 2016. So if we want more choice, more rental properties, lower rents, abolish the Section 24. The next thing I would do is to encourage the development of smaller PRS sites. So I'd probably get a government scheme running to provide finance and encouragement, maybe through the taxation system, to create new houses as well as flats, which then have to be rented out to private tenants. This would increase the supply into the private rented sector, again, help with quality and the variety of different properties in the right areas, and it would serve as a real strong natural cap on rents. We need more supply, more choice, and at the moment, landlords, not just through the taxation system, but also through the messaging that the government has been putting out and the media has been putting out, landlords are getting put off. They feel like they're being victimised, so they are leaving the sector. Another huge area is licensing schemes. I know why lots of local councils need to properly license and inspect HMO properties and single lets in areas where the quality isn't great. But for them then to make profit out of those schemes, I just don't think that's right. And again, I think it discourages landlords, and I think it pushes rents up and it reduces choice. At the moment, I can think of one council in particular. I've seen data that shows they've taken something like 4 million in for their latest licensing scheme. The cost of providing that is about 2 million. So there is 2 million profit there to be shared between the council and their service partner. I don't think it's right. The licensing fees are generally really high. It would be interesting to know who people think are actually paying those licensing fees in the end. It's the tenant. The landlords in the end have to pass the cost of doing business, as any business does, onto the customer, i.e. the tenant. So these high licensing fees are just reducing the supply of these properties, and these extra costs are being passed on to the tenants. The final thing that I would do is to stop all of these pensioners being robbed. At the moment, the government is looking to abolish ground rents on existing tenancies. So, you know, these might be freeholds that funds and various people have bought as investment, loads of pensioners. And the government is looking at effectively expropriating these investments. You know, they're doing what Robert Mugabe did to the white farmers in Rhodesia and Zimbabwe, and what maybe they'll start doing in South Africa, just taking these ground rents and basically saying, you no longer can receive any ground rent on these freeholds. You know, these are people that bought flats. They understood what the ground rent was when they purchased. Yes, it's wrong to have those ground rents doubling every 10 years. Yes, fine, set a cap on the ground rents. Yes, fine on new leases, make it draconian, reduce them. Maybe you set them at 0, which will probably increase the price of the flat a little bit, because obviously the developer took some of the margin out of the freehold and the ground rent. But on existing leases, where people have paid tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pounds for this investment in order to receive this ground rent, is that fair? Lots and lots of pensioners, people that own these ground rents, are losing that income stream. When people paid for these flats, they knew what the ground rent was, and they paid a price that effectively took that ground rent into consideration. It was baked into the price of the flat when they bought it. So I don't think it's right. I think it's wrong. I think it sets a really bad precedent, and I would definitely not introduce that new legislation. So that's my plan as your housing minister, but what do you think I should do? Put your comments down below and make sure you like and subscribe.